Good morning. I'll call the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority monthly meeting for August to order. And the first item on the agenda is items from the chairman. The first one being the election of officers, and I'll turn that over to our secretary, Jason Fairbrush.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Hey, just wanted to make sure that the trustees were aware our previous chairman, long-serving Chairman Chris Kaufman, has determined for this year he would like to step down as the chair of the trust. Certainly will continue to serve on the board, looks forward to being back. Just wanted me to share that with the group, that he's working through some health issues, plans to be back, would like to step down as chair. So thus, we need to call for an election of officers and elect a new chair and a vice chair.
I would like to nominate Barney Simpner for our chair.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. And if everybody would go ahead and, are we going to vote?
I did, but it shows here as Brent. I don't care. Doesn't matter.
Brent can take credit.
I got a little finger, quick finger there.
Okay.
Are you logged in? Yes. Okay.
Steve, take my second.
Please give it a second.
I think everybody's voted.
No, it'll be on the record.
Yeah.
Okay, motion passes. Okay.
I would like to nominate Meg McElhaney for vice chair.
Okay, it's been moved. And
I'll second. Yeah.
okay, it's touche, I guess. So all in favor?
Got it done.
Vote appropriately. Okay, motion passes. Congratulations, Meg. The other item from the chair was a report from the Oklahoma Railway Museum, and the report is in your packet. The Oklahoma Railway Museum has an agreement with Copta. They operate and maintain the railway right-of-way that Copta owns on the northeast side of town from 4th Street on up to 63rd Street. And Drake Rice is here as a board member and of that organization. And the reports there, they carried over 31,000 individuals annually last year, and looking forward to their activities again this year. Are there any questions for Drake? Would you like to say something?
I'd just like to say, on behalf of the Oklahoma Railway Museum Board of Directors and Eric, our president, he could not be here today due to conflict with business, but we appreciate the long-standing, it's about 26 years we've had with Copta, and it's been a good partnership, we believe, and we generate a lot of traffic, especially at Christmas time and special events at the museum. We thank you for your work that you do here in serving our community with transportation. If there are any questions, be happy to answer them. If not, I'll get out of your way.
Well, I just appreciate everything that you all do. It's an exciting, interesting part of our city's entertainment area, I think, that you all operate. So,
And just remind you, Polar tickets are on sale now.
yeah, Polar Express coming up this fall. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, trustees.
Okay. Item 3 on our agenda is residents to be heard. Are there any residents? I didn't receive any, so don't think there are any. Item number 4 is approval of our minutes from our June 2nd Copta meeting. Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. If everybody would vote electronically. Motion passes. Moving on to the consent docket, there are six items on the consent docket. Are there any that the trustees would like to pull and discuss individually? If not, is there a motion to receive or approve the consent docket? It's been moved and seconded. If everybody would vote electronically. Motion passes. All right. Moving on to items for individual consideration. Item A is a resolution ratifying and approving a change in the annual cost estimate for the pricing agreement with Cummins Southern Plains for Cummins engine parts and services, increasing the annual estimated cost to $480,000 for the period ending October 6, 2025. Jason?
Yeah, so with approval of this item here, really what this does is allow staff to have more purchasing authority for the existing contract that we have with Cummins. We competitively bid that periodically, enter into generally a multi-year contract. And when we set those contracts up, we estimate the amount that we think we're going to spend, provide that information to the trustees. What we've noticed is, and probably not a surprise to anyone, that particularly over the last couple of years with the aging of our fleet, the fact we've got a larger fleet, and then particularly this last year, just with escalation of parts prices, we've been exceeding that estimated cost. And so I know staff has done some analysis on this. So we're recommending that we increase the estimated annual cost to $480,000. Again, we came up with that number based on current expenditure trends, and then we increased it above what that current expenditure trend is, with the idea of just providing enough purchasing power if we go over. So nothing will obligate us to spend the full 480.
Are there any questions or comments about this item? If not, is there a motion to approve? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say, or vote electronically. Motion passes. Item B is an amendment number 1 to the professional services agreement with Hawks Agency for customized customer service training, increase of $35,000.
Yes, sir. So if I could like to spend a little bit of time giving some background to this item, because I think it would certainly be informative to the trustees to understand how this item really ties back to our customer service survey results that we've received over the last couple of years, and really how we rely on those survey results to kind of set our objectives or priorities moving forward. And if you'll recall, we scored very well on the last customer service survey that we did. But one of the areas, because there's always areas to work on and to improve, one of the areas that the consultant said, you know, hey, this is kind of one of those where if you put some time and resources into it, you could potentially, you know, move the numbers, right? It was kind of one of those lower scoring but high importance for our customers. And that's just the overall level of customer service that we provide as a transit agency. We understand that, you know, providing customer service throughout the entire city certainly creates its challenges. But again, looking back at those survey results, always evaluating and analyzing how we can get better, we've been on this journey to try to determine what is an appropriate customer service training program for our organization. We quickly realized that, you know, something off the shelf that might work for a retailer or a restaurant or a hotelier is probably not going to work for our industry. And so that's where really the uniqueness of this contract with Hawks Agency comes in. And so we have hired Hawks Agency as a consultant to come in and develop a customized customer service training program. And there's two parts to the item today. The first agreement we had was really having the consultants come in, talk with our employees, do some focus groups. They rode our buses. So they really did a deep dive into understanding our organization. And so that was this, the first task order, if you will. We're coming back to the trust today asking for an additional $35,000 in contract authority, which would take the total amount up to $112,000, to really go into phase 2 of the customized customer service training, which is several things, but primarily a series of training videos. And through this week's what we refer to as coordinates meetings, where we meet with all employees in small and large groups, we're able to preview that first video. And it's really, really good customer service training, very entertaining, high energy, but I think most importantly, it's relatable for us as transit professionals. So would encourage you, if you have some time on your hands, to watch that first training video. It's really good, and this, with approval of this contract or this amendment, will allow us to continue adding to those training videos.
Okay, are there any questions or comments about item B? If not, is there a motion to approve the action? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Item C is Amendment 3 and Renewal Number 1 to the Professional Services Agreement with Houck Transportation Advertising for advertising sponsorship and naming rights services, amending the revenue proposal and renewing the agreement guaranteed annual revenue of $500,000 and estimated additional revenue of $1,117,999 retroactive to July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2028. Jason?
Yes, sir. So with approval of this item, as mentioned, we would extend, or I should say renew, our agreement with Houck Transit Advertising through 2028. We've actually been in a advertising relationship with Houck since 2017. They've been a great partner in terms of working with us to sell the streetcar sponsorships, also advertising for the streetcar, and then advertising for our rolling stock or our fixed route bus fleet. So we were able to sit down with them and negotiate a new, or I should say a renewal agreement that would actually increase the minimum guarantee to $500,000. And then the memo, and I won't go through all the details, but I just want to point out the memo in your packet actually has 4 different revenue strategies that are detailed out. Again, primarily the big one is the minimum annual guarantee of $500,000 for advertising on OKC bus, streetcar, Spokies, and BRT. Obviously, this agreement contemplated the addition of Bus Rapid Transit and the potential of also selling sponsorships for those platforms. But we're also looking at a revenue strategy for our off-street parking facilities, something tailored for Oklahoma River cruises, and then also accounts for Norman as well. So with approval of this item, we will be in an agreement with Houck until 2028.
Okay, I think this is exciting that we can use it as an opportunity to expand our revenue from marketing efforts. So that's good. So is there a motion to approve item C? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Item D is a joint resolution of COPTA with the city Municipal Facilities Authority approving settlement of the workers' compensation subrogation claim relating to the payment of medical bills paid pursuant to state law under workers' compensation against any proceeds recovered on behalf of Maida Wilson arising out of injuries sustained in an automobile accident on March 22nd of 2022, or to enter into executive session to discuss that further. Jason?
Yeah, this particular item is a bit unusual in that this is actually a joint resolution with the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. As we know, that is really the city's self-insurance mechanism for workers' compensation. The thing that makes this unique is this is actually a claim where another automobile operator, if you will, was at fault, unfortunately caused some injury to a COTPA employee, and so the OCMFA, through mechanisms available to them, have subrogated that loss, if you will, that they paid out with the insurance company. So for us, or actually I should say for the OCMFA to receive that subrogation, that money back into the insurance pool, if you will, we need to approve this item just as a joint item with the OCMFA.
Okay, so is there a motion to, do we handle this by a D1? Is there a motion for D1 or D2?
Just a motion, so the question is, do we need just a motion for item 1, which
So
is to
we're
approve the
to
joint
just
resolution?
approve it unless there's
Right.
a vote called to go into executive session to discuss it further. Okay. So there is a motion to approve D1. It's been seconded. If everyone would go ahead and vote. So that motion passes. Okay, item E is a resolution retroactively waiving competitive bidding for the 2017 and the 2022 electric bus procurements that were purchased consistent with Federal Transit Authority or Administration's grant guidelines requiring a partnership with an electric bus vendor and using grant funds from the Low or No Emission Vehicle Program, and requiring a copy of this resolution be kept with said procurement file. Jason?
All right, so this item here does probably require some explanation. I know the memo that's included in your packet is almost a page and a half here of narrative, so I'll try to do my best to summarize. But so just kind of taking the trust down memory lane a bit here. In 2017 and 2020, we were successful because of the trust support in approving grant applications in obtaining funding from the FTA to purchase 2 electric buses, our first one in 2017, our first one in 2020. And if you'll recall, particularly in 2017, the idea of adding electric buses to transit fleets across the country was a big priority for the FTA and obviously the administration supporting the FTA at that time. As such, the FTA came out with a very unique program for the basically no emission bus grants. And whereas normally when we purchase buses, we would go through a competitive bidding process. I mean, the trust has approved those competitive bids before. However, this particular grant actually asked transit agencies to go out and find partners, specifically bus manufacturers, to partner with the transit agency to agree to, build and deliver these electric buses. So we have a long-standing relationship and actually a current contract with New Flyer. We approached New Flyer, entered into that partnership. Obviously, there's lots of advantages to entering into a partnership with a vendor that we're already doing business or buying buses from, because even though it's an electric bus, a lot of the parts are still interchangeable. Interior parts, body panel parts, brakes, those kinds of things are interchangeable. And so it just made sense for us. So we moved forward, complied with the FTA grant requirements, were successful in obtaining funds. And now, as we're going through and we're reviewing and cleaning up our procurement files, what we realized is that COTPA's own purchasing policies, what we adopt as a board, or I should say what you all adopt as a board, they don't account for partnerships. I mean, it's a very unique purchasing situation. So really, this item is brought to the trust, in my mind, as simply, being very technical and making sure that our procurement files are complete. And when we looked at our procurement file for these purchases, we realized we could probably use some additional documentation and action by the trust to waive competitive bidding. Because again, we don't have a provision for partnership purchasing. So all that said to say, we're asking the trust to retroactively waive that competitive bidding for those 2 electric bus purchases since we entered into a partnership with New Flyer.
Okay, that was very concise. Thank you.
I tried.
Well, are there any questions or comments about this item?
Yes.
Okay.
What would, what would the thinking, I know we weren't in the federal government or in that administration, what would the thinking have been for this approach of waiving competitive bidding and to take this partnership approach?
Yeah, I think, obviously can't speak for the FTA, but I think one of the things that we were dealing with in the industry at the time was if we wanted to purchase electric buses, who was going to be providing them? There were electric buses being manufactured, but it wasn't as prevalent there wasn't as much emphasis, I guess, in 2017 in particular as there is now. So in my mind, one of the things the partnership allowed us to do is when we applied for that grant, we had to have a bus vendor, if you will, also commit to delivering the vehicle. Whereas without that partnership, not saying this is the case, but there was probably some risk that we could be awarded a grant for an electric bus and then wonder who's going to be able to deliver it, or is it going to take 5 years to get the thing? So I think that was part of the thinking, or at least from a transit agency perspective, that was one of the things we thought through as well. At least we apply for the grant, we know we've got a vendor that can deliver it.
I do think, I want to echo that, because I feel like in many of the grant opportunities that we've seen from the federal government in the last several years, there's a commitment to put a lot of money out into the system. They don't want it just sitting there. They want to get it spent. And so they're trying to expedite that expenditure process and recognize that there are supply chain issues still that are persisting since the pandemic.
Thank you.
Okay. So is there a motion then to approve item E? It's been moved and seconded. If everyone would vote electronically. Item passes. Okay, moving on to section 7 is ratification of claims and payroll. The first one is ratifications of claims and payroll from June 6th through June 27th, 2023. Are there any questions or comments about those? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve. It's been moved and seconded. If everyone would vote electronically. Motion passes. Okay, item B then is a ratification of payroll and vendor claims for the period of July 5th through July 25th, 2023. Are there any comments or questions? If not, is there a motion to approve? It's been moved and seconded. If you'd vote electronically. Motion passes. Going on down to our financial reports, the COPTA schedule of revenue and expenses budget to actual for the month ending May 31st. Suzanne, hi.
Good morning.
Good
How are we all
morning.
today?
Good.
So I'll be presenting on the full entire 12 months of the fiscal year. So it'll include May, but it'll also include June. So since it's the year-end report out, I thought I would just spend time on each of the programs, but I will not dive deep in those. So if you have questions, feel free to interject, but I'm just going to keep it pretty high level and just hit the highlights on each of the various programs. Starting with page 1, I would just point out this is our overall combined budget, and our budget was $54 million, and we have revenues, and we wound up collecting $53 million in revenues. Just about $960,000 below budget. And then going down to the total expenditures, we budgeted $54 million and ended up with expenditures of $51 million. So we had an operating income of about $2 million. So that's the overall. Let's turn over to page 2, which is our transportation operations. And this is page 2 of your June report. So the total revenue, which is kind of in the middle of the page there, our total revenue is $36.5 million, which is a negative variance of $1.1 million. And then going down the line there, we have expenditures totaling $35.7 million, and which our operating income wound up being $735,000 for the year. I do want to point out a couple of caveats to this. Some of these numbers are not totally finalized. We have a $400,000 federal grant draw that's not included in the revenues. So you'll see under federal grants, there's a negative 2.2 variance. That's row 9. That actually is going to have $400,000 more added to that. And then also within the expenditures, personal services has a positive variance of $335,000. The final payroll of the fiscal year is not included in this number, and that payroll is $868,000. Of course, when you're looking at the budget overall, that still does keep us within our budget of our total expenditures. So if we added that $868,000 in, that puts our expenditures at $36.6 million. So that still leaves us $1 million under budget with our expenditures. So also, I just would mention to you up on the revenues, rows 9, 10, and 11, those are our 3 grant lines there. So if you added those 3 together, you see a fairly large negative revenue under federal grants of $2.2 million. But then below that, those 2, that's our CARES and our ARP grants, those are in the positive. So if you combine those together, that's actually plus the $400,000 draw that we're bringing in, that puts us at a negative variance of $500,000 for our grant revenue. So I just wanted to kind of show that math for you to see where we actually ended up for the fiscal year was a negative $500,000 in revenue draws. And in this scenario, when we're talking about grant draws for our revenues, if we're in the negative variance, it's actually not a bad thing. What it means is that we're able to cover our operating expenditures without doing all the draws that we had anticipated to fund those expenditures. So in this scenario, having a negative $500,000 revenue just means that we had enough revenue elsewhere to fund our operating expenditures that those typically cover. So that way we can use those grants for other purposes. One other thing I'd just point out to you is the very last line under the revenue section, prior year fund balance. So you'll see we had budgeted $724,000, and we wound up not having any actual year-to-date, so we've got that negative $724,000 negative variance for revenues. And that's another scenario where it's actually a good thing that we have a negative there. We budget that in case we need it to cover our expenditures, but since we didn't need to, we didn't wind up using that revenue, so that negative is, in fact, a good thing. So I just thought I'd point those nuances out to the trustees. So we ended this fiscal year adding fund balance. I mentioned a couple of the expenditures and revenues that aren't yet in. So if we do the adjustments there, you see it's $735,000. That number becomes more like $270,000 that we added to our fund balance. So I know that was kind of a lot of information. Any questions on that before I move on? Okay, so page 3 is our Embark Norman. I don't talk often about this, but I just thought I'd at least just review with you the final numbers for the year. Again, these are preliminary. We do not have our June invoice reflected here, so our revenues within this report show $3.1 million, and expenditures also at 3.1, so a $10,000 difference between revenue and expenditures. Once we get our June invoice in here, it'll be, our final numbers will look more like 300 and, sorry, I lost my note here, $3.5 million, excuse me. Our invoice is $430,000 it is pending. So if we flip over to page 4, that is our parking operations. And our total revenues for parking are $6.4 million, so 821,000. Oh,
I think the vice chair does too.
Oh, okay.
I have a question on the Norman.
Both, actually.
Yeah, maybe I'm just looking at the wrong row, but I don't know that my numbers in my booklet match what you're saying verbally,
okay.
is all. That's just where I was just.
On Norman, you said, for
Yeah,
June?
page 3, for June. I thought we were on page 3.
Yes.
Page 3 for June, Norman.
Yeah, we had,
It's gonna be-
since we
yeah, keep going.
didn't have a meeting last month, we actually have 2 sets of financial reports in
that-
here. So,
Okay, didn't know we switched to another tab, so it's just user error.
sorry about that.
Okay, moving on to parking.
Okay. So parking revenues for 12 months is $6.4 million, and that is $821,000 above where we had budgeted. Our expenditures were $5.5 million, which is $76,000 below budget, or excuse me, above budget. We were over budget there. Our operating income is $897,000, so we added about $900,000 to our parking fund balance. And just kind of, I think month to month, we've been adding monthly customers to our parking garages, as well as our events have picked up. So we've had quite a few more users at events and more events occurring. And so overall, that's impacted our positive operating income there. And I would mention to you that it's in your program packet, our occupancy, it's in the parking program report, but this year's occupancy is 79%, and just comparing that with prior year is 71%. So certainly a contributing factor to our operating income. And then if we turn over to page 5, this is our river cruises. Total revenues for river cruise, $950,872, which is a $45,000 positive variance. And then our total expenditures are $839,000, which is also a positive variance of $66,000. So overall operating income of $111,649 added to fund balance. So on the ferry contract operations line under expenditures, that $747,000, that does include the entire year of invoices. Typically, when you see these reports where we are mentioning that we're 1 month behind, and in this scenario with our year end, we have all of our invoice expenditures reflected here for River. We've also performed the annual reconciliation process where we look to see if we've overpaid or underpaid HMS to provide service. And in this scenario, in this case, this year, we actually overpaid, so we did get a reimbursement, which lowered our expenditures. So this $111,000 operating income is a fairly final number for us. Turning over to page 6 is our Spokies operations. Our total revenues for Spokies for this fiscal year are $160,000. So we had a negative variance of $16,000 for Spokies. And then our expenditures were $139,624, a positive variance of $37,000. So our expenditures were less than our revenue, so we still added to our fund balance $20,000. The negative revenues, a lot of that has to do, and I've talked about this a couple of times, but a lot of it has to do with the way the contract is constructed with Drop, who is our provider for the Spokies bike services. So our revenues are much lower than they've been in the past with that contract, but what happens is our expenditures have been reduced quite a bit, which is why we're seeing such a variance, a positive variance for our expenditures. And then finally, streetcar, the last page, 7. Our total revenues for the fiscal year were $6 million, and just slightly below budget, 2% below budget. And our total expenditures are $5.8 million, 341,000 under budget. So we did kind of come in right around where we had budgeted for revenues and had a fairly good savings on our expenditures. And a large part of that, just as a reminder, was that MAPS did reimburse us $211,000 on supplies, so that did help our expenditures be reduced somewhat this fiscal year. I also want to just point out to you on the advertising, just to keep you all up to date. Last August, I was reporting on the fact that several of our sponsorships for our 22 streetcar stops had expired. And so HAUC, the agreement we just renewed today, they're very focused on getting those sponsorships increased. So they've got 8 that they just recently signed, and 5 that they're having conversations with now. So they are, I think that the MAG itself speaks pretty highly of their commitment to really working with us to get our advertising increase and the opportunity that they see with adding on our BRT services for advertising as well as the off-street parking. So we're hoping that next year we'll see a good bump in our advertising for streetcar revenues. The streetcar operations line under expenditures, that does include all 12 months invoices. So that's the entire fiscal year included here. And it's a negative $70,000 on the expenditure. So we went over a little bit, and that was due to some rail repairs. And those are repairs that are pass-through expenditures that wind up in that line item there. So that is the variance. So those are my comments for our year-to-date, our entire fiscal year 23 report. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Are there any questions or comments to Suzanne about the financials? That looks very promising, so.
Yes, good numbers.
End
Thank
of the
you.
year, I think that's great. So we have to ratify both the June and the July, no, the May and the June reports. So is there a motion to receive the May report? It's been moved and seconded. If you'd vote electronically. Motion passes. Now, is there a motion to receive the June financials? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Moving on then to our program reports. We have the printed program reports, and so my order is to go ahead and receive the entirety of the submitted program reports that you have in your packets. So is there a motion to go ahead and receive our program reports? It's been moved and seconded. Please vote electronically. Motion passes. Now, there is a presentation of the BRT, Bus Rapid Transit Update and Transit System Report from Jesse.
Good morning. How's everyone doing? Hope everybody's having a great summer. Congratulations on the new appointments. Very exciting. Before I start, I would like to do a quick introduction. So I do have a special guest in the audience with me today. I have my oldest daughter, Madison. She's here for 2 reasons, really. So back in spring, she wrapped up her public speaking course at OCCC, and kind of walking her through that, get nervous doing public speaking, and was like, hey, I do this all the time, hundreds of times, and guess what? Still get nervous every single time. And then finally, the second reason is I never miss an opportunity to publicly embarrass her. So Madison's in the audience with us today. I'll be giving an update on the Northwest Rapid and a transit update also. So.
Jesse, they do say that getting nervous is the implication, the indication that you care. And
That's
so
right, exactly. I do care very, very much.
That.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump into our Rapid Northwest. So quick update on our bus deliveries. So our 3 recovery buses, 2221, 2222, and 2224. So we have received 2221. 2222 is wrapping up production, and we're expecting to receive that next week. And then 2224 is currently in production, and we're expecting to receive that the first week of September. Show you a couple pictures of those buses. So this is 2221, entered line production April 3rd. And like I said, we're expecting to receive that next week. And then this is our third and final bus. We're expecting to receive that the first week of September. Talk a little bit about construction. So we talked a little bit about the bike lanes last time. So those are continuing to get wrapped up. You may notice the delineators along Classen to help provide that separation. And then let's talk a little bit about our construction. So construction at Robinson and Park continues. We wrapped up our water line installation, and then we're moving on to our concrete pad construction. So we had a few delays there with our water line construction. So our original completion date was 6/16. We're anticipating that being wrapped up at the end of this month. I don't know where my photos are, but that's okay. Classen and 31st, construction's continuing there. I'm just going to go through these. This is not the presentation that I provided. So construction is moving on. This is
So
perfect
Jesse, one
slide.
of the things that I'd like to mention about this too is that there have been not unusual, but difficult complications that occur in constructing anything in a fully developed downtown area. And so especially where you hit like Robinson and Park, you dig down and you find things that you didn't know were there. And in this particular case, we dug down and found a giant water line that interfered with electricity, which electricity and water, as you're probably aware, don't go very well together. So, and one of the things that Embark and Public Works have tried very hard to do is working with utilities to make sure that once the bus locations, the stops are put in place, we don't have to go back and dig up a broken water line or damaged electric line or anything like that. So some of these things were unanticipated, but I think that the staff's done a really good job of working together, bringing all the departments together to help get those issues resolved. So.
Yeah, exactly what you said. So anytime we're working downtown, as soon as you get below ground, you get surprises, but we've been working with all the different departments, utilities, public works, to move the construction forward. So this graphic here really kind of explains where we are in construction. So if it's a light green, that means it was completed last month. If it's dark green, that means that it's since been completed since last time we talked. So lots of dark green up here. Nearly all of our stops are wrapped up. Really the three stops that we have left are at Northwest 23rd and Classen and the Park and Robinson stop. A lot of our amenities are going in, and as you drive the alignment, you should see a lot of shelters going in, lots of pylons, and lots of railing going in. So lots of movement, lots of construction getting wrapped up. We're anticipating construction being wrapped up in October. So this is a slide that kind of shows the percentages-wise since last time we talked. So last time we talked, the MC 0619 project was about 48% complete, and now we're about 65% complete. The local match projects, 54% complete last time we talked, and 65% complete this time. Our water line betterments, huge increase there as we're wrapping up everything below ground. So last time we were here, 38% construction completion, now 64% complete. Our total project completion is about 65% complete. So that wraps up the Northwest Rapid construction update. I do want to point out that, I'm up here giving the presentation, but Kristen Torkelson, who you'll hear from later, she's really the leader in this project. She's our senior project manager. She's the one that's out there, out in the field, meeting with the contractors, making sure that the project's continuing to move forward, out there taking pictures in the 103-degree heat and working with everybody. So I just wanted to tell her thank you very much for all of her hard work. And then we'll do a quick update on our transit.
Yeah, Jesse, we're seeing a lot of the shelters and pylons going up around the route, and it's exciting for an October launch.
Yep, it is. All right, so we'll give a quick transit report update. So talk about world class, right? So we talk about that often. This is an example of, we're just 8 months into this year, this calendar year. These are some of the awards that we've won and just in the 8 months, right? So some of the big ones here, with the Oklahoma Transit Association, our roadmap won the marketing campaign of the year. At the APTA AdWheel Award, our roadmap won that award also. The CTAA awarded us with the large system of the year. And then recently we won the Hometown Hero Award, provided to us by Visit OKC. And then some of our transit professionals won several awards this year. So Kirk Rainier and Laura Figueroa, they won our Frontline Hero Award. We've talked about it several times. That's at a human trafficking event that they stopped. And then Jennifer Smith won the OKTA Rodeo Championship. So very, very proud of her. Lots of hard work going into those awards. Very exciting. World-class service. So we provided the World Championship, or the Women's Championship World Series. We provided an express bus service for that World Series. This is an example of the ridership that we provided. So we carried 955 customers for that service over a course of a few days. So happy to provide that service and happy to partner with the World Series. Also, we brought a memo and an item to the board, and just wanted to express our thanks to the board to continue to support us. This is an example of that support. It's our paratransit vans. If you remember, we brought an item to the board to purchase 11 paratransit Dodge ProMasters. We have since received those. We're putting those out on the road. 6 of those 11 have been put into service. This is an example of 3 of them that are on our yard that are getting wrapped up. So essentially what goes into that is once we receive them, we have to put graphics on them, cameras, and the ticket vending machines inside. So a lot goes into getting those out on the road, and this is an example of your support continuing. Thank you. And then one last item is when we talk about world-class service. So we've talked about the van pool service, so we continue to provide that service. We have 2 of those currently in service right now, working with NewView. They use our van pool services to commute to Tinker. And then we're looking to launch a 3rd van pool item coming up later this summer with NewView, where they'll be transporting NewView to their manufacturing facility. So excited to partner with them. So let's talk about our ridership. So you can see we had a large increase there. So increase of 11% over last year and a 42% increase over 2020. And a cumulative monthly total for our Embark Plus system of June was 3,700, an increase over last year, or of last June of 3,400, and a decrease of June of 2020 of 3,900. So I did want to talk about some route modifications that we're looking at doing. So with OKC Moves, we're doing a lot of service increases. So we've got 3 that I did want to talk about here. So with Route 2, we're doing a modification here that removes the loop at 13th and Lottie. So we're anticipating that's going to improve service there. With Route 11, we're making a modification that removes the loop at 21st and Harvey. Some of the items that we've seen here is thinking about safety, right? So when we have snow events, we get into some of these areas with our fixed route buses, and we have trouble getting out sometimes. Or we'll go into some of these areas and we have large amounts of traffic parking on the street, and we can't make corners. And so instead of having to back out the street, have a supervisor attend to that road call, back down the street to be able to get out of that area, we are eliminating these services. But when we do something like that, we also make sure that we're not eliminating service to certain areas, right? So we went out and we verified that all of these areas have a pathway to get to the nearest stop, which is sometimes a few hundred feet away, and that they have safe walkable path to do that. And then finally, we'll be making a small modification to Route 12 here. This one's pretty exciting for us. So we're going to be making this minor modification that allows us to provide transit services to our headquarters at South May. So pretty exciting. So our folks can actually visit headquarters if they need to come to South May, and they can use public transit to do that. All right, so at this point, this is where I turn it over to Joel Garcia, where he's going to be talking about our OKC streetcar, Spokies, and river services. Thank you.
Good morning, and again, congratulations on your nominations. So for our streetcar, as you can see, we did have an increase over 2022 with a decrease, unfortunately, from 2021. Some of this can be contributed to the COVID that we did see, but we are rapidly increasing, and we are seeing some positive turns. Our Spokies. Spokies, again, saw a decrease on the 2022 numbers of 566 with a increase over 2021. We are in the process of still modifying some of our pedal assist only bikes. We have experienced a little bit of difficulties with the locks, but that being said, our vendor, Drop, has worked with us to correct those issues. So we are moving forward with that. Our river, we have a total increase of 22%. As you can see, our river program, after coming back out of COVID, has steadily increased, and they continue to work tirelessly to provide outstanding service. Do we have any questions?
I do. Shot in the dark here question, I guess. What is our, long-term vision for Spokies? What are we thinking? Like, because with, what is it, the little scooters the kids use these days, that's really cut into, I'm 41, so it doesn't matter anymore. But I mean, I see them, literally kids, they're on the thing.
Right.
That's kind of changed a little bit the dynamic. What are those conversations, if any, right now about Spokies, and do we see it expanding? Dramatically, or do we see where we're at being the plan? What's the plan?
I do believe that we do anticipate an expansion somewhere down the road, but not
Well,
anytime.
hang on. Okay, we would love to expand. We would love to expand. But the issue with the expansion comes operating costs. We are essentially maxed out with staff right now based on our current system. So if we were to expand, we're looking at hiring additional people to maintain and deploy the bikes. And so that is really what has, like, I would say, capped us at our current level of service, is those operating costs. And of course, as the trust is well aware, every year is how do we allocate our resources when we have limited operating dollars. And typically it boils down to other services, whether it be our plus transportation or, fixed route operations that kind of rise to the top of that allocation. So I just want to clarify that, and that we have had discussions, and to staff's credit, they have proposed expansions, they have thought through expansion plans, but it comes down to operating costs to go any further. I think the other thing is, like you say, when we launched Spokies, very limited, last mile transportation downtown. Now there is the scooters and also Lime bikes. I should say bikes. I shouldn't have, plugged the corporate name there. But nonetheless, there are electric bikes that we do not operate also downtown. So I think that's kind of changed the landscape as well.
Well, I ask for really two reasons. One, I attended recently the MAPS 4 subcommittee for connectivity.
Okay.
I've never done this. I, kind of hands off, but thought it was time to go visit with our good friends. And it just so happened this was the day that the beautification consultant was presenting. And one of the top survey results from residents when asking, like, what would you want these beautification dollars, where would you want them expended? One of the top one was connectivity to the local districts. In fact, the local districts are, to my great happiness, are a significant source of pride for people. And they say that when people come to visit us as a city, they take their family and friends to the districts. That's good. But they wanted to prioritize better connectivity to those districts, which was music to my ears, of course. So that's one thing I would kind of point out. So as we, through Bike Walk and MAPS 4, and as grants make it possible, as we're implementing the bike infrastructure to further complete the network and the sidewalk infrastructure, this takes me to my second thing. Having recently returned from Copenhagen, the second a person steps off of the train into Copenhagen, it is just bike city. Just if you were just imagine this wall right here, but instead just imagine just endless rows of bicycles just stacked up, and residents just taking these bikes and riding to these places. It just makes me think, as the BRT is coming online, and then subsequently the south and northeast side, at these park and rides and these stations, right? It would make sense for us long term. I'm not saying go out there right now. I'm hearing what you're saying about those operating costs, and that's why I asked what is our long-term vision here. It just makes sense that the more accessible the bikes are around these shelters, these stations, the more it will click in people's heads, okay, I can use the, I've gotten, for instance, if someone exits the BRT at Meridian at the Park and Ride, and there are bikes there, right, which I don't know that we have bikes there right now. I know we do in the Uptown District, for instance, or Paseo, but if someone were to get off a bike there, now they can take that bike and go around Lake Hefner. Moreover, it's not just about going around Lake Hefner. They can access all kinds of things, not just for recreation, and I don't think a lot of our residents would think like that right now, but I think truly the presence of the bike signifies things. And the other thing I'll tell you, this conversation I had with my mom, who's 79, when I was saying all this, she was like, "What, baby?" Like, the idea that she would get on a bike was just, what's going on here? But in Copenhagen, 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, I mean, it is, but I think it's because the network is built out. Yeah. Like, they have a huge cycle track network that is just connected in this way.
Speaking as an elderly person myself, it's also because they continue to ride a bike. I mean, I haven't ridden a bike since I was probably 17 years old. And so when you stop, it gets scary to get back on one because you could break a hip. Sorry.
No, it's fair.
For real.
It's fair,
For
and I
real.
think we should voice those concerns into, the air, of course. I guess what I am here to suggest is that on the flight, someone from ULI had given me Ashley Sewell Terry had given me Copenhagenize as a book to read, and I did. And I would suggest, I understand that fear. I would liken it to the same fear that I have anytime I travel to another transit agency and I'm gonna ride for the first time the subway or whatever. And it's like, oh, I'm gonna mess up my credit card, whatever it is, or I'm gonna end up in Sweden. I think it's a very similar fear, but there's that cliche that once you learn, you never forget.
Right, and that was kind of my point is if we had a culture here where people did continue to ride bicycles, then I think that would absolutely change the way things are approached. Do you know in those, in Copenhagen, are those bikes operated publicly or is that a
That's what I was
private?
looking up. I was trying to
Yeah.
find that out. I know there are multiple bike rentals. So maybe, from different agencies. I rented one from a hotel. So it could be that we find ourselves partnering with different folk. As you were presenting, and as Jesse was presenting, I was thinking of Ride OKC. The other thing I would say about, yes, many residents we know no longer ride their bikes. But the reason why I referenced Copenhagenize, and I know this will sound maybe abstract or pie in the sky, but Copenhagen in the 70s, their bike ridership as a population had declined to 20%. It was at 20% of their people. It had been much higher in the 20s. The reason they started riding again was the fuel crisis that hit us globally, as we all know, in the 70s. I may be 41 and wasn't alive then, but I like to read, so I know this happened. So what happened was, to address the fuel crisis, the residents got bikes, and then the city started building the infrastructure. It did not exist. In fact, in the 40s and 50s, the city, like most American cities, had moved toward widening streets and car infrastructure. So I guess I'm saying this to say, it's not that there's something unique about Copenhagen in terms of its culture, its people, or its history. It really began in the 70s that infrastructure found itself implemented. And that is how people in their 70s and 80s, now it is a 62% ridership. And it's one thing to read it, it was a whole other thing to ride on it. I think the good news is, and the book emphasizes it, that really the residents got out of the way of the city government in the 80s and 90s and just kind of let the government plan that network, implement that network, and it took its time. Reading that, it became clear to me, we're in a different scenario. We are kind of ramping up that infrastructure investment through maps, better streets, et cetera. And I guess what I'm suggesting to us is that as we are doing that, we have these opportunities to put certain other infrastructure, i.e. a bike, multiple bikes, at these BRTs as they come online over the next 10 years of our lives, as simultaneously we are putting in the sidewalk and bike infrastructure. These things together will work to get our people acclimated to the idea, like, I got off here, now how do I finish the rest, the first mile, last mile travel? So I'm wanting to will this into existence right now, this idea of thinking across the different mediums as they're each coming online. And to remind us, there is nothing unique about us or Copenhagen. It really is the infrastructure. That's what I've learned. And I've been thinking about it. I'm obsessed with it now. And maybe there still will be someone who's like, my hip, you know, and I get it.
No, I think the point I was trying to make is exactly what you were making, is that change comes, and we are in that process of implementing bike walk and infrastructure ramp up, and that theoretically, I mean, it's been 50 years since the 70s, so theoretically in 50 years things will be great. And you're right, we need to start doing things now to do that. I would just say that as a person who's a little bit scared about operating costs in general, it's kind of worrisome to try to think about that. But you're right, I mean, little bits and pieces here and there as we grow make the difference.
So that's also my encouragement to the staff, to Jason's point, who are advocating for the expanding of Spokies. They should continue doing that, and they should be thinking much bigger and longer term, but trying to figure out how to mitigate Laura's concerns about the cost.
It's always something, right?
I do believe with most of our BRT stations, platforms, they do incorporate bike racks.
They do.
To encourage that final mile to utilize the bikes, and we do plan on incorporating Spokies at selected stations, and then when we see the need.
And I think I really, until this presentation, it had not really clicked. I don't think we have bikes, the Spokies, as far as like Portland. So that's what I'm saying. I think it's time for us to start thinking about putting some out there to start kind of breaking the fog of, you know, we don't bike out here. I think those sorts of intentional, I guess that's the word I'm wanting to really interject here. We need to be thinking intentionally about where we start placing some of these Spokies along that route as we move forward. And that'll be, I think, true with the south and northeast ones as well.
And we do bike out there.
We do.
Because if you saw the complaints I saw about the Wilshire Bridge over Northwest Expressway from people who wanted to ride their bikes across the Northwest Expressway, you would know we do bike out there. Somebody does anyway.
And then think, oh, sorry, you were saying something.
It's the pedestrian bridge took a very long time to finish over the.
And then I have one more question. I don't know if it's for you or for Jesse. The ridership numbers for the softball, from where? Like, where are these folks staying? Where are they going? Where are we connecting them?
Yeah, no, great question. So we basically set up a route, right, that would, it started at the convention center, went by the transit center, and then it went to the softball ballpark there. So
The
it's really
convention
3 stops.
center was kind of the nexus because there were so many people staying at downtown hotels.
That's what I was, okay.
Right.
Yep.
Interesting. That's great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yep.
That's it.
All right.
I'd also like to call everybody's attention. The last page of your packet has a summary of services for June of 2023, and it shows the difference between 2022 and 2023. Weekday bus ridership is up 15%.
Yeah.
Night bus ridership is up 20%. Weekend bus ridership is up over 15%. Spokies is up 50% from last year. So we're doing something right.
Can't do it without your support. Appreciate it.
The benefit to the city is tremendous.
Absolutely.
So,
So thanks
thank you.
to all of you.
Yes.
Yes, we appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to a presentation of the capital improvement projects. Krista?
Good morning. Okay, I'm going to give you an update on our transit center. So these are going to be some very exciting photos, first of all. This is the pad for our new HVAC unit. So the last photo that I showed you all was the trench, also very exciting. We were waiting for that to dry out. We had one of the rainiest Junes ever, so that finally got filled in. So this is the pad that the HVAC unit will sit on. And then you can see down here we have the blocks starting to go in. This is for the enclosure. So they're moving on that. Now we're inside. This is in the operator lounge area. So we have the new cabinets that are put in. The ones down below were actually wrapped to protect them, so that'll be removed eventually. And then we had some new lockers put in as well. We had some new light fixtures put in, so it's a lot brighter in there. This is the men's restroom. Everything has been demoed, so it's ready to be ready for new fixtures and new wall coverings. Also new lights in here, so it'll be a lot brighter. This is the women's restroom. Same kind of situation. New flooring. This is our bubble, the existing bubble. So a couple things to note. This is the ballistic, or the glass that had been removed. They basically have gutted everything. And then if you look over off to your right-hand side, you can see how it's all open, and we'll see a new wall go in there. This is the inside of the bubble that was gutted. So then we have new countertops, and we have new millwork, new cabinets down below. Also the ballistic glass that went in. So it's a lot lighter. It'll look brighter in there. This is the countertop on the outside. You can see the glass from this side as well. And then our maintenance team, led by Dennis Fry, built a temporary bubble. You can see the white door there. It was super important to keep service open to all of our customers. So Paula and Guy, who work in there, they're still able to answer all questions, sell passes, all that kind of stuff. And that, we actually, there's air conditioning in there because it's blazing hot outside, so it's very comfortable. So this is the change that I was telling you about earlier. This is a new wall that was put in. If you have been in the transit center before, the operator lounge is teeny tiny. It's literally a table with like 4 chairs. There's always people in there, you know, passing through, using the restroom, getting some water, whatever. So this will be an expanded operator lounge area. That's the wall from the other side. And then this is new interior lighting. It's the black lights that you see there, so it'll be much brighter inside. And then this is the lighting update from the outside. So we have all of the lights put in except for 2 of them. You can see the before and after, how much brighter it is. Just as he was saying, he was going for the on-cue effect. So I think we've established that. It was also a safety issue. You can see how dark it is. And that's the after. So all the lights here are done except for those 2 green dots on the south end of the building. Those are just some pole lights. The contractors have finished everything on the north side. They've opened that area back up, and they've moved all of our chain link fencing to the south side so they can start work there. Do you have any questions for me?
When are we expecting this will be complete?
So the restrooms, my current date is the middle of September. The HVAC unit will be finished by the end of this month, so then we can reopen.
I'm really kind of, when will the fence be down from the whole project?
Overall project.
Yeah.
That should be a lot sooner. It's the restrooms that have taken a little bit longer, so the exterior will be done
I just see
sooner.
people huddled in the shade on the opposite
know,
side of
I
the
know.
street, and I feel for them. And I know some of them are not bus passengers, but on the other hand, some of them could be, so.
Right. And if anything, if the HVAC unit is turned on, we could still rope off the other side with the restrooms and allow people to come inside, so. That'd be one option.
But you don't know a date when that might happen?
Well, HVAC is end of this month, so it could be then. Anybody else?
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Kristen.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to items from the trustees. James, Meg? Jason?
Yeah, one comment. Really just wanted to provide some context to the audit report that has been provided to each of the trustees. This was a audit that the city auditor conducted of the streetcar system contract that we have with Herzog, specifically focusing in on the areas of maintenance. And again, with the idea of giving context, the city auditor engages department heads annually as part of their audit plan. And they ask department heads, you know, kind of how things are going. Are there any areas you'd like us to look at? That's one thing about our city auditor. I know you probably heard this before. Is they're very proactive. They're collaborative. They work to try to get ahead of things. And so through that interview process, we had mentioned that, you know, we do have a new-ish, if you would, contract with Herzog. Understanding the streetcar system is relatively new, you know, we never have really took a look at that contract and compliance. And so we had suggested that as an area for them to look at. It made it into their annual audit plan. And so here you have the results of the audit. Certainly happy to discuss individually with the trustees any of the information in the audit. However, I would characterize it as a very good audit. There weren't really any major issues. There's always things we can work on and improve and tighten up. I think having seen a few of these in the past, the fact that it's only 7 pages long and very thin is also an indicator of the fact that it was a pretty clean audit. So anyway, just wanted to provide some context and of course give you a copy.
Okay, thank you. Everybody have a good, cool August. And I think at this point we're adjourned. Thank you.